accident this winter, so still recovering. Thank you all for your continued attention to this matter. I think it's a critical matter, and boy, where do I begin? I do feel like I was part of a grand experiment that failed miserably. I've been in many an election in this small community and have always felt at least that it started out as a fair fight. That, you know, whether or not people chose to run on personality and do other things that were perhaps not high and dealing with issues, but in reality, when you get down to, let me just say, I at least was a very big fan of the idea of public financing of campaigns. You know, whether Citizen United is the end result to be blamed for, or whether we can't, just as a small enough community, impose a certain standard, a moral, ethical standard on candidates, just because, you know, they'll know that the public won't stand for it. And so that's what we thought we did with public financing of campaigns. But I will tell you that, you know, when the first PAC formed that was favoring one candidate, I felt like, okay, I got one hand tied behind my back. I can't actually move this other arm, so I'm not going to get too demonstrative for you. But by the time the third PAC, and then maybe let's call them fourth, because Progress Now got involved, came into play, I felt I was just a target, you know, and clearly all the mailers began to target my campaign and my candidacy, and it was not a fair fight once the first arm was tied behind my back, and by the time that I was completely just exposed to dark outside money, and when there were no remedies offered through our code or through your interpretation of that code or through our attorney's interpretation of that code, there was really no race left. It was not a fair fight. So I can tell you that I have I'm not sure that the new matching proposal, it would just up the ante. I think that money wasn't the issue in this campaign. For the outside money was there. The volume of it was not going to, you know, it was really kind of unbelievable, given that, you know, both Mr. Demas and I were capped and just going out there with all volunteer campaigns and knocking on doors and doing it the old-fashioned way and really trying. I mean, you know, we certainly involved social media and what have you, but it was on a shoestring, a complete shoestring, and we'd already done the real effort of raising those many $5 contributions, and, you know, following the letter of the law. It was disheartening, to say the least, that we, you know, and I'm just going to back up a little bit and say that, and from my vantage point of having served in this community for quite some time and run quite a few elections, things changed at the council level elections after former councilor Wurzberger raised huge sums for the first time in council races. And then really, I guess it was former Mayor Koss who kind of upped the ante financially on the mayoral race, but it still didn't involve outside, you know, dark money, with no real admitting that they were there just for one candidate. So I can't say that, you know, I know the Constitution doesn't allow you to impose a limit, but I think that collectively, perhaps, through the media, through social media, through the public, if there's a way to really almost shame candidates into saying that they would only, you know, for council races spend like $15,000, and for mayoral races, honestly, I thought 75,000 was going to be plenty if we were all on a, you know, we're at a fair playing field. And I don't know how you get there. I honestly don't. I do think that it will discourage good candidates from considering running for these local offices the way that the system is now. And I wish I had answers. I thought public financing was it. I was very earnest in my first attempt when I ran for council on public financing, and I advocated it for it when I was on the, you know, at the council level, and I had really high hopes. And you know, with the timing, with the time frame, the short time frame, there was no stopping the influence of this outside money. I mean, there was manpower, there was literature. I mean, it was just it poured on at the end, and there was no, you couldn't refute it. You couldn't. I had no resources to respond. It was not a fair fight. So I don't know what more to say other than I think our campaign code could use a top-to-bottom review, and there has to be some way to really clearly define, you know, if all of the resources of this outside money are being poured on to favor one candidate, and you know, the answer is no, there's no connection, there's no collusion. I mean, you know, for the average voter that doesn't know all the players, and then I'm going to back up and just say, I also, this was the first time I had participated in a campaign where we were subjected to sort of a machine politics that, I mean, how do you define that legally? How do you disconnect all the connections? It was a serious web that was not going to allow for a fair electoral process. So, I'm sorry to say I don't come at this now thinking that public financing of campaigns is perhaps all that it was meant to be. And you know, I'm not sure I would encourage very many candidates in the future to consider it if we can't find a way to really limit the influence of outside money on our little town. Thank you for your time, and I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Beamer.
Councilor Boucher, do you feel that one approach, and this is truly a question, not a predilection, one approach is to make as expansive a definition of coordination as we can, given that legally, given that the Citizens United firewall, if you will, seems to break at the point where there's coordination. Once there's not coordination, there seems to be nothing that anybody can do legally until.
Well, I think there needs to be, thank you for the question, Paul, and I think there needs to be an expanded definition. There needs to be an enforcement mechanism by which if one can interpret that, and I'm not an attorney, and you know, I'm sure it's a fine line to walk with Citizens United and our state constitution, but I will say that there needs to be a penalty if coordination is, and it needs to be strong, like the candidate that is receiving the benefit of this coordination and or outside money loses all of their funding or has to pay back, or you know, the public's money, because it was the public's money, you know, and it was misused given the influence of the outside funds.
If I may, would you go so far as to call for an end to the public financing rules if they can't be fixed, given your experience?
Well, I mean, people choose, it's a voluntary thing, and they can choose to participate, but I guess I would just, I would say that it's an illusion that it's creating a level playing field, and I would, you know, let folks know that there's potentially is going to fall into that pitfall if coordination occurs. And I mean, the saddest part for me in this process was that, I mean, we knew it was coordination. We knew all the players in the mix, but how did you, I mean, what would have mattered at that point? You know, it was too late. Too little, too late built into the ordinance to actually do anything, and the interpretation, the legal interpretation wasn't going to, it wasn't there either to really stop the sort of steamrolling that took place.
You mean legal interpretation or?
Well, I mean, you know, nobody would even call it coordination, and I mean, it was pretty hard from my vantage point to not describe it as that. Good luck.
Anyone else?
Okay, no kidding.
Thank you, Councilor Boucher. Councilor Demas?